Okay,
Yes, you can record for the radio.
welcome everyone to the 2021 Kings Washington Area Alumni Club's Career Day program. My name is John Wetterow, and I'm a member of the Kings class of 1970. I'm also a proud member of the Kings Washington Area Alumni Club's Executive Committee, better known as KWAC. I'm happy to be your host today and to welcome each of you. There's students, there's presenters, there's alumni, there's friends, and there's also King's staff to the first virtual KWAC Career Day program. KWAC Career Day is traditionally hosted here in Washington, D.C. by the KWAC Executive Committee. For many years, the exciting program has provided a wide range of professional opportunities to King students, thanks to the generosity of many King's DC area alumni and friends, many of whom are presenting today and or observing in the sessions this year. If you haven't already, please be sure to mute yourself while our presenters are speaking. There will be time at the end for Q&A, so save your questions for that time or put your questions into the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. King's is recording this session for future access. We've had 5 terrific sessions scheduled this year. 3 have already been performed, and this is the 4th one, and we followed by one more after this one. This session is titled Rewarding and Meaningful Careers Serving Our Great Republic in the Executive and Legislative Branches. And I want to introduce our moderator for today, and that is the Honorable Patrick Mulloy, who has served 5 two-year terms on the 12-member bipartisan U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. He presently practices as a trade lawyer and political consultant to nonprofit groups interested in reforming U.S. trade and economic policies, including for the President Emeritus of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. He also served on the adjunct faculty at the Catholic University Law School, where he taught either international trade law or public international law for a dozen years. He has testified before Congress on international trade and finance matters several times and served as an assistant secretary in the Clinton administration in the Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration. Prior to that, he served as general counsel and chief international counsel on the staff of the U.S. Senate Banking Committee. Earlier in his career, he served as a trial lawyer in the U.S. Justice Department and as a Foreign Service Officer in the U.S. State Department. Mr. Malloy received his LLM from Harvard University Law School, his JD with honors from George Washington University Law School, an MA in International Politics from the University of Notre Dame, where he was a university fellow, and best but not last, a BA degree with magna cum laude honors in government from King's College. With that, we turn it over to Patrick and his team. All yours, Pat.
John, thank you for that really nice introduction. I'm a King's graduate, class of 63, and I'm the moderator of today's panel. What I wanted to do was prevent an opportunity for the students at King's and the faculty as well who may be watching to get an understanding of the great joy and reward that you get from being involved in public policy positions here in Washington, D.C., or serving the Great Republic and other places in the world. And we were very lucky to get 3 terrific panelists to speak to us, because they've all had wonderful careers and still serving wonderful careers in Washington or elsewhere. I want to do it like kind of like a Senate hearing. I've asked, and we'll introduce each panelist before we start, but I've asked each panelist kind of to tell us about a little bit about their background, what got them interested in serving in the public service, how they went about getting a job to start, what they've done in these various positions, how they might have been able to go to school at night and get other credentials that help them rise in their profession, and then to say whether they would recommend such a career for young people. I think the Great Republic needs young people to come down and help the Republic, because we're in a difficult time for this country right now. And I wanted, and I'm very appreciative of Freddie for Fred, the vice president of King's, got our panelist who's at our embassy in Uzbekistan. And Freddie's going to introduce her, and then I'll introduce both Ed and Dennis. And then we'll go back and start with Debbie to make her presentation. Then we'll do Ed, and then we'll do Dennis. I might add a few more words, and then we'll open it up for, well, if anybody wants to comment on the other person's statement, they can, or ask a question. And then we'll open it up for the students and the faculty and others who may be watching to ask questions or clarify points that are being made. So Freddie, why don't I turn it over to you now?
Great, thank you, Patrick. And first, just a few words of thanks to John Wetterau, who I know has been playing host, representing the executive committee of KWAC on each of our sessions. So thank you, John, for playing that important role here on our first KWAC virtual career day these last many days. Thank you to Ambassador Shea. It's great to meet you for the first time on this call. I look forward to getting to know you better in the days beyond this. Welcome to my friend Ed Williams. We appreciate you making the time to be here, Ed. And of course to you, Patrick, for those students who are participating today. Patrick Mulloy is one of the treasures of King's College. He's a member of the class of '63. As you've heard a little bit about, he's had a long, distinguished, wonderful career serving our great republic, as he likes to say. And we're grateful for you for the many ways that you serve our school, Pat, including organizing and moderating the panel today. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to introduce my good friend of over 20 years. We met in law school at the Beasley School of Law at Temple University, Debby Robinson. So Debby has an extraordinary career. And as we've grown in our careers and we've gotten a little bit older as days have gone by, I've watched with admiration and awe and wonder how she has navigated the globe to serve our country in such a distinguished way. Just to give you a little bit about her story. So Debbie's a native of Colorado. She did her undergraduate degree at Brigham Young University in international relations, then went to Temple Law, where we had the good fortune to meet and become friends there. And after her law school, she worked for some time as a prosecutor before joining the Foreign Service. And once she joined the Foreign Service, her career has just continued to accelerate, where she's served in locales such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, Colombia, the United Arab Emirates. And for some time now, she's served as the counselor for political and economic affairs at the United States Embassy in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And as Mr. Malloy expressed at the outset, there she is, 2 o'clock in the morning, her time in Uzbekistan, joining us here today to share some of her experience. I'll finish with this to our students on the call. What a treat this is for you to be able to be part of, and kudos to you for taking the time to listen and learn today. We have a wonderful panel who have extraordinary professional experience serving our country in very different ways. And I'm excited to hear how they got their starts, how they navigated their roles in the government over these many years, and just know again of my deep appreciation for our moderator and our panelists for making the time to be with us today. We're thrilled that each of you are with us, and Debbie, it's great to see you. It's been too long. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Brent. I guess I'm now introducing Ed. Ed is a native of Wilkes-Barre, Kingston area. He went to Myers High School. He's a Myers Mohawk. And then he had a chance to go to Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is, I believe, in Pennsylvania.
It's actually
I first met Ed when I was up there. I was up there campaigning for Al Gore in the year 2000. And that's where I first met Ed. Were you working then for Paul Kondrasky, Ed?
I was. I just started.
He was working for our local congressman, Paul Kondrasky. Ed and I hit it off. And then he later came down to Washington and worked in the office for Congressman Kondrasky and was doing great jobs. And I think had his whole appropriations portfolio. Ed at one point asked me if it would be wise to go to law school at night. I was then teaching at Catholic, and I told him I did it, and it was a great help to me to be able to go to law school at night. I went to GW while working at State. Ed did go to law school at night and then had the chance to go work for the senior senator of Pennsylvania, Robert Casey, who is a native of Scranton, just like our president is a native of Scranton. So there are great things going on up there in the coal fields of Pennsylvania. And I want young people there to know that you get great values up there and great work culture. And Ed is the kind of guy that has done great work for our republic. I think well, I didn't know you had a degree from American University as well. You might want to mention how you got that before you even went to law school. And so Ed, why don't I turn over to you and you tell a little bit about your life and what you've done and what you would recommend for young people.
Sure. No, thank you. And thank you for
Oh,
inviting me.
one more thing. I guess I should introduce Dennis and then we'll get going on everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, Dennis Shea, I learned more about Dennis in putting this panel together than I knew before. I knew he had roots in the Valley. His mother actually grew up in West Pittston. And he married a girl from Kingston. And then I found out that his father-in-law was at one point an adjunct professor at King's College. Dennis grew up in New York City, but he used to come to the Valley, and his mother's a Marywood College graduate, I think. And then Dennis and I first met on a trip to Japan, a staff trip to Japan, a Senate staff trip. I liked him immediately. He was working for Bob Dole, and I was working for Democratic senators on the Senate Banking Committee. He helped Bob Dole run his presidential campaign, was on the policy group there. And then Dennis, he has 3 degrees from Harvard University. He has an undergraduate degree, a master's degree in Russian studies, and a law degree, all from Harvard. He came down to Washington to start working in a law firm. And he can tell you about that and then why he leaped at the opportunity to go up and work for Senator Dole and what all that led to for him and his life's work. I think he went to Regis High School, which is a Jesuit school in New York City, which I think is a premier Jesuit school. Isn't Dr. Fauci, I think, is a Regis College graduate. So let me turn it over to Debby, and then we'll walk through each of our panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Thank you both, Dennis and Ed.
Thank you, Pat.
I think
Good evening. You ready? Good evening, everyone. Thanks to Freddie for the introduction, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. I'm in very distinguished company, and I'm I think proud to be an honorary invitee of King's College and the KWAC. So thanks for having me with you tonight. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what my career has been and the things that I've been able to do in the past 20 years while I've worked for the U.S. government. So I'm a Foreign Service Officer, which in kind of the common terms means I'm a U.S. diplomat. And we serve at embassies and consulates around the world, and we carry out various tasks here. But our main responsibilities are advocating for American foreign policy, protecting American citizens, and promoting American business interests throughout the world. And as we do that, we drive the formulation and achievement of American foreign policy objectives. Now, my work has been mostly in the political and economic areas, which I can talk a little bit more about, but people that work for the State Department work across all kinds of fields. There's a little bit of everything in the Department of State. When I started 20 years ago, I actually, as Freddie said, I had my undergrad degrees in international relations, then I went to law school and had an emphasis in international and comparative law. And so I knew I wanted to work in the international field, but I actually didn't know that there was the opportunity to work for the government. I found that out when I was traveling through Europe, actually as a study abroad student from Temple Law. And friends of mine said, hey, have you ever heard about being a Foreign Service Officer? And I said, no, but let's find out more about it. And so that's what I ended up doing. And the reason that I think I was able to do that is because to get into the Foreign Service is unlike some of these other careers that you'll hear about. It's actually a testing-based process. So I signed up for a written exam, which is the first step. And when I passed the written exam, I went to an oral exam and I passed that, and I got put on a list and eventually got hired into the Department of State. So it's not it's a little bit of a different process than other jobs that you would find in Washington, D.C. And you know, if you're interested in learning more about it, careers.state.gov is the website that has everything about careers at the Department of State. And we can get you more information if you're ever interested in that. Had I known all that time ago how great to, you know, what the kinds of things that I would have been able to do in the last 20 years was, I would have jumped at the opportunity to work for the government. You know, in the last 20 years, I've lived in, worked in, and traveled to more than 50 countries. And I've been able to do some really cool and some unusual and very hard things, which have given me a lot of great experiences. I monitored the referendum of a vote that created a new country, Montenegro, which when I started with the department was a part of the Serbia, was part of Serbia, Montenegro, which was one country. I lived on a military base in Afghanistan with the Air Force and advised the local governor on good governance while I ate goat fat and fresh pomegranates. As the situation in Syria started to escalate, I stood on the border of a canyon in Jordan and watched the Jordanian military bring refugees across from Syria to try to help them get away from the violence in Syria. I've traveled with a U.S. hostage team to the families of hostages in the United States whose family members are being held hostage overseas, to advise them as to what the U.S. government was doing to try to help their family members that were being held hostage. I've met presidents, vice presidents, ministers, all kinds of high-ranking officials. I've been to big parties and receptions, and I've also, you know, stood in my cargo pants on a military base in Afghanistan, wondering if I'd ever have a hot shower again. But probably the best part of my job has been the other people that I meet, the people, the human rights activists, the business people, the salespersons, the students, the people who are a part of their country and have taught me more about what it's like to live in the countries that I have been lucky enough to live in. And so when it comes down to whether or not I would recommend this job for people who are looking for careers out of college, I would say yes, because I feel like I've got the best job in the world, and I feel like I'm lucky to be able to say that. But I would say that this job is not necessarily for everyone. As I said, I've traveled a lot. I haven't lived in one place for more than 3 years in the last 20 years, and I've moved 11 times in the last 20 years. On the other hand, I get to do something new every 2 to 3 years. It's like having a whole bunch of careers in one, because every place that I go gives me a little bit of a different opportunity. And I get to travel and see the world. And I think that's one of the benefits of being a diplomat, is that I get to do it where the US government pays for it and takes care of me. And I get to have this unique perspective on the world. I get to see places. I get to go to historical sites. I get to see the wonders of the world. I get to try new food and experience new holidays, all of the things that come with travel, which is one of the great loves of my life. And so for me, that's a perfect fit. And I get to see how other people live, and it expands my horizons. But I think going back to the theme of this presentation, the thing that to me is the very best part of it is that I get to represent the great republic in which we live. I get to all day, every day, I get to be a representative of the United States. And I think there's nothing like living and serving abroad that makes me more proud to be an American and to be representing this country to other countries around the world as we try to advance our interests and we try to help others in those countries meet their ideals and meet their goals. So if travel and adventure and a change of pace and the ability to be flexible appeals to you, then I would say this career is definitely for you. And with that, I'll turn it back over, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Mute.
I began my career as an FSO, and I still stay in touch. We came in as a class, A100 they called it, and we still stay in touch, and we have dinners every so often. to get together. Being in the Foreign Service is a wonderful career, and we thank you very much for all you're doing in it. Ed, if I can turn to you now.
Absolutely, Debbie. Thank you for your presentation. Fascinating, and thank you for all your service. I mean, I would just note for the record, if it's not clearly understood, that that work is so vital. So anybody thinking about a career in the Foreign Service, I can't imagine how rewarding it is. Dennis, great to be with you. I noted that you worked for Senator Dole. He's in our thoughts. Everybody cherishes him as an American hero. So we hope he's doing well. Thank you to Pat for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. When I saw the group I was going to be with, I was wondering why I was here, but proud to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about my career. Thanks to Freddie for bringing me in here too. King's College is an incredible institution. I grew up 4 blocks from King's, wasn't a student at King's, but come to be a friend of the institution over many years, particularly during my time working as a professional congressional staffer. So great place that's done great things for students, done great things for the city of Wilkes-Barre. So such a cherished place in my heart. So my name is Ed Williams. I'm currently serving as Senior Vice President and General Counsel at a consulting firm called McAllister and Quinn, where we focus on working with a number of nonprofit institutions to understand the federal landscape as it relates to competitive grant opportunities and advising them on how to interface with federal agencies. My start, though, was a long time ago. As a Myers High School graduate, going out into the world. My mom and dad hadn't had the benefit of going to college, so me showing up at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster as a first-generation student, I was a stranger in a strange land, and I'm sure many of you on the call here might be able to relate to that. Got an interest, frankly, while I was at Myers, but certainly enhanced when I was at F&M in government and politics and history. And became a government major while I was there, not because I aspired to go and work in Congress or had a clear path and knew what I was going to do at 18 years old, but really following where I was generating some passions and some interest. And by the time I was just about done, started to look around and try to figure out what I was supposed to do next. And again, as a first generation college student in a place like Franklin and Marshall, not unlike King's, a lot of students were going on to be doctors or lawyers. And I guess I thought maybe I needed to go get more education. And that led me, as Pat indicated, to pursue a master's degree at night at American University in Washington. When I then had to figure out what I was going to do during the day. So I did a couple of things. First, while I was at Franklin and Marshall, I worked on a program, a federally funded program during the Clinton administration called America Reads, which the program was really focused on pairing college students up with 3rd and 4th graders to be a reading buddy as a federal work study job. So I had a federal work study job that led me to do that job. Then I ran the program during my senior year at Franklin and Marshall and had the bright idea that I was going to write a letter to the director of the America Reads program at the U.S. Department of Education to see if she had any career advice for me. Well, that led to a part-time position as a staff assistant working for Carol Rasco, and Carol was a great mentor of mine. She actually served as President Clinton's first domestic policy advisor during the first term. During the second term, she was at the U.S. Department of Education. But they only had time for me to be there for 2 days a week, and I needed to pay the bills and pay the rent and everything else. So I started looking around to see where else I might be able to land, and wrote another letter, which is a time when we actually did those things, to Congressman Paul Kanjorski's office. My hometown member of Congress represented Wilkes-Barre with great distinction for a total of 26 years, starting in 1987. I'm sorry, it was started in 1986. He won his first election in 1985. I showed up in his office in 1999 as an intern, and frankly, fell in love with the legislative process and the work that we do, or I did at that time on Capitol Hill. Really, what was the inspiration for me was the ability to do things that were impactful for the place I grew up in. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But those positions in the congressman's office led me to work on the appropriations process, which I won't get into great detail now, but it is the process by which Congress makes resource allocation decisions on a yearly basis with the portion of the budget that is discretionary, meaning Congress has discretion over it on a yearly basis. Worked on that effort with the congressman's office. I was there for a total of 7 years. Senator Casey was elected in 2006. I went over to his office in 2007, was his first legislative staffer hired when he moved over from state government to the U.S. Senate, and did the appropriations work there. Then had a statewide view, had competing interest on a statewide basis, but learned a lot in that position. That's when kind of at that time when I was leaving the congressman's office and going to the Senate office, I sought Pat's counsel. Thanks, Pat, for advising me, yes, that going to law school at night while you're working full-time was a great idea. He was right. But it is not for everybody, and it is grueling. So 18-hour days, the benefit was, one, I didn't have to give up the work that I really liked to do on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Two, it was fortuitous. I graduated from law school in 2009, which for those of you who remember that far back, remember that was the height of the Great Recession. So the idea of having gone at night kind of insulated me because I was already in my professional pursuits with the Senate office. Fast forward a couple years, the Senator asked me to become his state director, overseeing his 7 statewide offices in Pennsylvania, servicing 13 million constituents, managing a staff of 30. That brought me back from Washington to Pennsylvania, so 12 years in Washington, and then ended up back in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, where I'm now living, where I split my time before COVID between Washington and Philadelphia, but was with the senator's office for 8 years, and then made a decision to, frankly, a personal family decision to move into the private sector, to have a little bit more in the way of a work-life balance. So I can talk about that if there are questions about that transition to the private sector and what that looks like. But my career has been very, very rewarding, because even in the private sector, I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing in the public sector, of helping worthy nonprofit organizations understand where there are federal resources to service and support their mission. So that's given me a perspective that I never would have thought I would have had when I was a Myers High School graduate, trying to figure out what the next step in my life was going to be. So grateful to so many mentors and advocates I had along the way, including Pat from way back when in 2000 during the Gore campaign, the ill-fated Gore campaign, where I learned so much from him during that period, but throughout my time, 20 years on, continue to learn from him all the time. So thank you.
Ed, you great job. You're a credit to your family and to the Valley. And you're doing important work now because there's going to be a lot more money out there. The government's going to be spending a lot more money as we focus on infrastructure and other important things that have to be done in this country. Dennis is just back from 3 years, our ambassador to the WTO. So Dennis, we thank you for being with us, and we'll turn it over to you now to make your presentation.
Sure. First of all, I want to say thank you, Pat. Thank you, Ed, for your service and for your kind words about Senator Dole, and Debbie. Certainly, thank you for your service. Sounds like you've had a very enriching career. And I've been to Tashkent. I've been to the U.S. mission in Tashkent, and it's a beautiful city with very wide avenues. I don't know if you were with me on that trip with the China Commission, Pat, but. And thank you, Pat. You know, it was really a great privilege working with you in the United States Senate. We're both staffers, and working with you, collaborating with you on the U.S.-China Commission. I think it shows that, believe it or not, people in Washington can be from different political parties, yeah, and collaborate and get along and do things together and actually become friends. And be friends. So I think that's important for people to understand. And Pat is you're a true patriot, Pat. I honestly, I strongly believe that. So, I mean, how did I get involved here? Why am I sitting in a basement in Arlington, Virginia right now? I'm at my home. I think it all started years ago. I won't say how many. As a kid, you know, when I was growing up in Forest Hills, Queens. As a young person and as a teenager, I always felt something in me. I want to be involved in public policy. I want to be involved in the big issues of the nation and of the day. That was always something in the back of my mind. I never understood or had a idea of how that would manifest itself, but I had that desire. So after law school, I applied to a New York law firm, but to the Washington office of a New York law firm. And I came down here to Washington and did corporate mergers and acquisitions. Of course, I never intended to be doing that for the rest of my life. It was just to come down to the Washington area and sort of figure out what's going on. So that's why I'm down here. And I've had a career. I guess I've covered everything, most things. I've had a legislative career. I was a deputy chief of staff and counsel to Bob Dole, U.S. China Commission, which Pat and I served on as an advisory body to the United States Congress. So that's sort of the legislative experience. I've had an executive branch experience as the assistant secretary at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for policy development and research. I was also an executive director of the the President's Commission on the U.S. Postal Service. We're set to fix the Postal Service, come up with some recommendations to fix the Postal Service, and do that within 6 months. But we issued a report, and several years later, many of our recommendations were part of a postal reform bill back in 2006. And then I've served as deputy USTR, U.S. Trade Representative, and U.S. Ambassador to the World Trade Organization in Geneva. So I've had an executive branch experience. I've also been involved in the nitty-gritty politics of the day. I was on the Dole for President campaign. I was the policy guy on the campaign. I was the guy on the plane who Bob Dole would point to. I was the guy, the facts and figures guy, who could also write a quick speech when called upon. That was my job. And so I've had campaign experience. I was also an advisor to Senator Elizabeth Dole, Senator Bob Dole's wife, of course, who was the chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. I did that in 2006. I was the body in charge of recruiting Senate candidates and fundraising for them. And I've done the private sector thing. I've been, represented a corporation in what was called government relations, government affairs function for a corporation. So I have not been in the judiciary branch, but I've done the executive and legislative, and I've done politics. And it's been a bit of a circuitous career, but it's been an enriching one. So let me just leave four points. First, Washington is about relationships. Yep. It's a people town. So one thing I was very bad at was answering people's phone calls so I would recommend people should answer phone calls. Go to job, your work hard. When we're after COVID, people presumably will be going back to offices. Just be a person that your colleagues want to be around. Be a positive force in the office. That goes a long way in success, in being successful in your job. The second thing I like to say is, I took the approach of dance with the one who brung you. It's an expression, hang out with the team that you're part of. And I think I've been part of a couple of sort of tribes or teams in Washington. The first, I mentioned when I got out of law school, I went to a New York-based law firm in their Washington office. Well, the person I interviewed, and he impressed me. He was a young partner, a guy named Robert Lighthizer. And he was the first guy who ever walked me to the elevator after a job interview. I'm 25 or 26. And he actually, wow, this guy's walking me to the elevator to make sure I get to the elevator, which impressed me. And I knew he had worked for Bob Dole as the staff director of the Senate Finance Committee. So I said, I'm going to go there if I get the job offer. And I got the job offer. I didn't work in the trade area, which was what Bob Lighthizer's area was in, but I worked in corporate. But he knew I was interested in politics and government service. So one day, about 2 years in, he walked down to my office and said, Bob Dole's looking for a counsel. Do you want the job? Do you want to work for, are you interested? And I said, absolutely. I don't want to be working on all this paperwork. I want to be involved in the middle of things. So I interviewed for that job, and he connected me with Bob Dole, and I got the job. And it was, just an amazing experience as a political junkie, which I was, as a younger man, young person. I was just, loved politics. And here I am in the middle of in the cockpit, working in the U.S. Capitol for the Senate Republican leader. Okay, and so that was impressive. The other thing is Bob, but then Bob Lighthizer, I've kept in touch with him over the years. He calls me up in 2017 and says, do you want to be U.S. ambassador to the World Trade Organization? It was out of the blue. I wasn't seeking it. And I said, well, Bob, I'm going to have to ask my wife. I'll call you back tomorrow. So I'm just telling you that's being part of the tribe, and then being part with Bob Dole. When I started hanging out with Bob Dole and working for him, he's the one who got me working for Elizabeth Dole. He called me up. Could you please work for Elizabeth? She needs some help over at the National Republican Senatorial Committee. He called me up after the 1996 campaign and said, do you want to work with me at a law firm? I'm going to a law firm. Why don't you join me at the law firm? And I went with him to the law firm. So these connections, being part of the same group of people who are together for long periods of time, I think is something that's very, you should keep in mind. It's connected to being good with people, being a positive force, being a good colleague. So I'm just saying the relationships are very important. The third point I want is you should view every job as an opportunity to learn, okay? View every job as an opportunity to learn. It's not just a job, it's a learning experience. When I worked for Bob Dole, I had no idea about the Senate rules. I remember spending Saturday nights reading the Senate rules because so much of what was involved in this office was parliamentary procedure, and it was just like gibberish to me. I had no idea what they were talking about. So that was an opportunity. HUD, PD&R. Did I have a lot of housing experience when I became an assistant secretary at HUD? No, I have to say no. But now part of what I do as a livelihood is based on my housing experience. I really dove into it and learned about what was going on there. The China Commission, I was on that for 11 years with Pat. I have to say I was not an expert on China affairs, but I think I became I worked hard, read a lot. Pat and I were the big readers, on the commission. And I think I know a little bit about the US-China relationship and China. And then as the US ambassador in Geneva, I had no diplomatic experience whatsoever, but I got thrown into the mix. And the US at the time, if you may have been I don't expect everybody to be following what the US is doing in the last administration of the WTO, but we were shaking things up a little bit, and I think legitimately so. But we were challenging the system and encouraging it to change. So it was a challenging time for the US ambassador in Geneva, but you learned by doing. And the final thing I want to say is just if you want to come to Washington, come for the right reasons. Come to serve, come to make a difference, come to make a contribution. If you want to make money, people make money in Washington, but maybe look elsewhere. If you want to engage in public service, come for that reason. And you can have a really enriching experience and an enriching career. So thank you very much, Pat, for the opportunity to share these pearls of wisdom or lack thereof.
Dennis, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Dennis and I did serve on that China Commission, which is a think tank for the Congress on China. It's a bipartisan group. Almost all of our reports were unanimous. You get Republicans and Democrats all agreeing as to what we ought to be doing here.
Yeah.
Finally, I think our country is finally waking up to the reality of what has been going on.
And
we went to China every year and would travel around and understand what was really going, how our corporations, they were utilizing our corporation to help them build their comprehensive national power.
Yeah, and let me just say that, Pat, you're the one who recommended that I try to seek out that opportunity to be
Yeah,
on the
on the
commission. So
commission.
Pat, the Democrat, was at, and you, that was, I thank you very much for putting that on my radar screen.
Well, I also knew Bob Lighthizer because I first met Bob, who was USTR and Dennis's good friend, when he was the head of the Senate Finance Committee, and I was on the Banking Committee staff, and I had a chance to meet Bob. I liked him very much, and I still stay in touch with Bob. He's a great American. Before we get into questions, I just want to add one more thing. I grew up in Kingston, Pennsylvania. I had no money and I had no opportunities. And I come out of high school and I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I remember being on the stage, graduation in high school. And my dad and I had gone over to see Priest at King's. And about a week after I graduated, I got a letter from King's. They said, we're going to give you a scholarship. We're going to give you a job in the library. That opportunity just opened up life for me to be at a wonderful school like King's College. And Debby, while I was there, I was starting majoring in accounting. And we had a professor who had it from Notre Dame with PhD at Georgetown. And he said, why are you majoring in accounting? I said, I want to be able to get a job. And he said, I think you should get a broader education. And I said, what could I do with that? He said, you could be a foreign service officer. I said, what is that? And he told me, and I said, boy, I geared my studies to try and pass that exam. And I did at age 21. And I took and then Notre Dame, the same order of priests, the Holy Cross priest, that Bishop Hapey, the Bishop of Scranton, wanted the kids from northeastern Pennsylvania to be able to get a good education. And he went to priest at Notre Dame and asked them to come to King's, and found King's College in 1946 for the sons of guys that, but without coal miners and others, didn't have money. And once you get a good education, my good friend Pat O'Connor, who was 1 year behind me at King's and now is the partner in Cozen and O'Connor law firm, big firm in Philly, he became chairman of the board of Temple University. He said the most important thing is to give a kid a chance to get a good education. And if they do, it opens up all kinds of frontiers, not only for them, but for their family as well. So I want to salute the priest at King's College and Notre Dame, who gave me this kind of opportunity in life. Debby, thank you for all you've done. And why don't we, if does anybody else want to say anything on what the other panelists said before we open it up for the students? Okay, well, why don't we open it up and see who, and we'll try and take questions. And I want questions, don't be shy. If you're not, well, then we'll start asking each other questions or commenting on what the other people said.
Rose, can you start us off? Do we have any questions?
Sure. We do have a couple questions, and Ambassador Shea, you really covered this point by point, 1, 2, 3, 4. But for the others, what tips would you give someone for looking for work in government?
Well, I came in just like Debby did. I found out, well, there were two ways I saw. One was to come into the Foreign Service exam. By the way, the reason I used the term Great Republic is JFK always used the term Great Republic when talking about our country. I campaigned for JFK as a student for Kennedy in 1960. And when he came to Wilkes-Barre, I got to shake his hand. And all I ever wanted to do was get down here and serve the Great Republic. Now, there were two ways. There's the federal, in those days, it was, I think they now call it presidential management interns. That you come in through OPM. You had a speaker on OPM the other day, Office of Personnel Management. That's one way you get into the executive branch agencies. The other I saw was the Foreign Service exam would get you into the State Department. And I chose to go that way. Debby, do you have anything more you want to add? Or Dennis or Ed?
Well, I would just say I agree with you. The Foreign Service exam, it's kind of an easier, it's not an easier path, but it's a known path. But my advice to people who ask about coming to Washington is get there and get your foot in the door. That's what I always say, especially at the State Department. If you can be an intern, if you can get a civil service job, it goes back to what Dennis says. It's a town of relationships. It's a town of networking. So once you get your foot in the door, it's easier to maneuver, I think, between branches, between agencies, and you kind of go where your tribe is, and you find people who will help you get to where you want to go. So that's always my advice: is get there and get your foot in the door.
I agree with that. I think that's the important point. Washington is really a small town. Of the people involved in all these politics and government and other things. And what Dennis said, relationships are very important. The other ability is you don't want to ever be dishonest with people. Your reputation and your ability to be honest and fair dealing with people is very important. But if you can get your foot in the door, you find a way to move around in these different agencies. Or like me, I got from the Justice Department up to the Hill because I found out there was you can get a year, your agency would pay you for a year to be on the Hill. And I wanted to learn about trade. And so I went up and I spent a half year on the House and then another half year in the Senate. And then the Senate Banking Committee, Bill Proxmire said, Pat, why don't you stay with us rather than go back to Justice? And I did. And then that opened up enormous opportunities because once you're up there, as Dennis points out, if you're with the political people, JFK said, how did I get from being second lieutenant to president in 14 years? He said, politics. And politics are very important in moving up because these elected representatives, if they like you, they can be very helpful. And they helped me get that Assistant Secretary of Commerce position under President Clinton. The people on the banking committee liked me, the senators, and they pushed to get me that job, and I got it. And I tried to do a good job, and my career people. The other thing, career people are so important when you're in a political position. Like I was there at Commerce. I didn't know the agency that well, but the career people, if they like you and can be helpful to them, they're wonderful. Like Debbie, you must be doing all of that to help the political guys that come out there as ambassador, or Dennis, when your career people at
they're
Geneva. Yeah, right.
The career people at USTR are fantastic, immensely helpful, and just if you work with them, you're gonna it's going to be great for both you and for them. So I wholeheartedly agree with that point.
Debbie, you want to add anything on that, or Ed?
I would just say, not unlike Pat, I didn't know anybody in Washington before I started. I didn't have an in. I mentioned I'd written some letters to places where I thought I might have some tangential relationship with individuals. I mean, if there is interest in the Hill, I think starting to look at your delegation, either from where you're from or where you are now, and understanding what those opportunities look like. I think the Hill has gotten a lot more progressive in their view of the world as it relates to interns, whereas a generation ago, interns were not paid, which we all understand that then leads to some inequities about who can take those positions. But the congressional offices, I think, are being a little bit more forward-leaning and offering paid internships. So that's a consideration.
Any more, Debbie? Okay, Rose, any questions?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. What is your best advice for preparing to take the Foreign Service exam?
That's for Pat and Debbie.
Okay, I'll tell you what I did. Dr. Dick Richard Stevens, who was my professor at King's, who convinced me that might be a thing that I could do. He said, you ought to get history, government, literature, and I did the seminar on the great books for 3 years at King's. That was a one semester, one credit each semester for 6 semesters. And so you're reading, Rousseau and Plato and Aquinas and all these people. And honestly, there would be that you get an enormously good education on American society and politics and other things, and it helped me. And economics. I did courses in economics as well. History, politics, and economics. Now, Debbie, what about you?
Pat, I think you were much more prepared to take that exam than I was. But I would agree. I think that we always joke that it's kind of like trying to win on Jeopardy. But I think you have to have a broad range of knowledge across those subjects that you just mentioned, Pat, and that's what I would recommend. These days, though, I think also I'm impressed that you even knew what a Foreign Service officer was. These days, there's all kinds of you can go online and you can take practice exams. There's all kinds of help aids out there for someone that's interested in taking the Foreign Service exam. But I'd say a broad-based education, really, what you just mentioned, Pat, is what I would recommend as well.
One more thing I wanted to mention, this whole business of cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff, which is now beyond my, but that's an enormous growth area in government in Washington, DC. So people who even have those kind of engineering or technical skills, or what do you call that, people who knows computers, and that, those are openings down here as well for those kinds of skills as well. And once you get to Washington, get a job and then start, you get a feel for the town and how to move around.
I have another question in chat. Is getting a law degree essential to having a career with the government?
I would say, go ahead.
Go ahead, please, Dennis.
No, I would say absolutely not. I mean, there are many people who've had very successful careers in government who do not have law degrees. So I would not say that that's any kind of precondition to getting a job in town here or being successful.
I would completely agree with that. I think to Dennis's point, a lot of ways to navigate Washington without a law degree. In some ways, it may distinguish you to not be another lawyer inside the Beltway. That's to say, I'm really proud of my law degree. It's benefited me in a lot of ways. It's a very personal decision, but I don't think it's essential whatsoever.
Debbie, any thoughts?
No, I agree. I was amused when I heard that we were all lawyers, that we were all attorneys. And I thought, oh, people are going to think you have to be a lawyer to work in Washington, but I would say definitely not. And in fact, there are a lot of lawyers at the State Department, but I think there's a lot of people in government and in Washington that aren't lawyers. So I don't think so either.
Let me just add, there are a lot of people in government who are fleeing the fact that they are lawyers. So let me just add that point.
Yes, I mean, being in a law firm is not that, I mean, to me, it never was that attractive. As you know, I got a BA at King's and then Notre Dame, and then was in the Foreign Service. They sent me to Montreal to follow the French separatist movement. But when I came back and looked around Washington, now this is an older time ago, this is 1967, 68. I looked around, I said, lawyers are very prominent in this town. I got to get a law degree. And I decided I would go to law school at night at GW. And I even got my boss at State, who Chris Herter Jr., whose dad had been secretary, he had some influence. He helped, they won't pay for a law degree, but he helped me get them to pay for some of the classes I was taking in law school. And to me, I was general counsel of the Senate Banking Committee, and I was also the parliamentarian for the committee. So I did find that having that law degree was a pretty good benefit in those kinds of positions I was in up there. But one more thing I want to mention, they have whole units on the Hill to draft legislation. The people in the Senate, they have a whole office up there that help you tell them what you want, and they put it in legislative language. Isn't that right, Dennis?
Yeah, I think those folks are the unsung heroes.
Yes, I agree.
Of Capitol Hill. I mean, they're in these rooms that no one knows. They're hidden, and you just come to them with your idea and some sketching, and then they draft something, and like magic, it shows up in legislative form. So I think they're unsung heroes, those legislative drafters. I don't know what you think, Ed, but
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you'd have some abstract idea that your boss came back from the recess with, and you're trying to figure out how the heck you're going to draft that up, and you put together a couple of bullet points, you send it down to Leg Council, and voila, legislative language comes out. So it's
right.
pretty
And we would go up and say, we want this bill referred to the Banking Committee, not to the Finance Committee. and they would tell us how to draft it or what they needed to put in to make sure it was referred to our committee. And because it's important where a bill goes and whether that committee is going to be the one that considers it and reports it out for full consideration by the Senate.
I have another question in chat. What were the opportunities that you gave up in pursuit of your position? In hindsight, was it worth it? It can be for everyone.
Well, we'll start with Debbie and go across the board. Ed, then Dennis, and then I'll come in.
I guess that's a kind of an easy one for me. The opportunities that I gave up. I mean, I gave up being an attorney to do this job. You know, I was working as an attorney when the call came to be a Foreign Service officer, and I chose to give up that and to go and travel the world. And I give up traveling around the world. I give up other things. I don't see my family and friends as much as I would like. I'm away for holidays and occasions, and I miss weddings and things like that. But to me, it's worth it. To me, I go back to what Pat said, the ability and the opportunity to serve my country and to get to have the amazing experiences that I do, it's definitely, it's 100% worth it. And you can make up for it in other ways, I would say. So, you know, there's always pros and cons to everything. And I also think it's how you look at it. And I choose to look at it with a glass really full kind of vantage point.
Ed?
So I guess I'd answer the question a little bit differently in the sense that I don't necessarily feel like I gave up an alternative pursuit that I had mapped out in my mind when I was 22 and I started on Capitol Hill. It's more about where I am now. I loved my time working on Capitol Hill. It's hard to be on Capitol Hill for the entire expanse of your career for a whole host of reasons, but I do miss that work. So I don't think I was at a crossroads, so to speak, when I was younger. I think I was just fortuitous that I ended up on the path that I did. But you do get, I think, at certain times in your career in public service to an inflection point where there may be other things that are going on in your life that require greater attention. And I think all of Dennis and Debbie can all agree with this, and Pat, I know you would. Public service is a calling, and it you have to be all in. You cannot do it half part. You cannot do it half time. If you're doing that, there are things that to Debbie's point, you're not able to avail yourself of. So I have two young children at home, and that was really what pushed me in the direction that I'm in now in terms of the leaving public service for the private sector.
Dennis, you have a daughter?
I don't have too much to add. I mean, I like it. I don't think I look at it as giving anything up. You know, in my career, I may have made a few or one or two or decisions that would have done differently in hindsight, in retrospect. But you know, that's life. You live and you learn, and so I don't view it as a negative. I'm happy with what I've done and look forward to doing more stuff ahead.
Yeah, Dennis is a young guy.
I'm not that young, Patrick.
I remember John Kennedy in his inaugural address said that we should let us go on to serve the land we love, asking his help and his blessing, meaning God's help and God's blessing, but remembering here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. And I do think the Republic is in trouble, and if you can make sure that this great Republic is around for your children and grandchildren and contribute to ensuring that it is, I think you're doing God's work here on earth. And so it always gave me great satisfaction that I was able to get these positions and help the great Republic.
I have one last question that was submitted by a student. What is your favorite memory? And I mean, I'm sure you have many, but what is your favorite memory of working in government?
Debbie, you want to jump in? We'll go across the panel.
Wow, I'm not sure I like being first on all of these. That's a tough one, I would say. It's like the question that people ask when people say to me, "What's been the favorite country that you've lived in, or what's been your favorite assignment?" And it's hard to pick just one, because I think I've been able to do a lot of really fantastic things. Wow, a favorite memory. I don't know. I would say that I really enjoyed serving in Afghanistan. And that's something that I think I'll remember for a long, long time, serving beside our military and being able to try to help the people there, you know, kind of understand what it was like to live in a freer country. So I think Afghanistan will always hold a special place in my heart and the service that I was able to do there.
Ed?
So Debbie had a great global perspective. I'm going to be much more local in my response to the question. I think the thing I'm probably most proud of is that I was able to work with Congressman Kajorski to make sure we secured the funding that was necessary to build the levee that's across the street from campus.
Yes.
That has protected the valley from Agnes level type flooding. for a generation, and that crystallized for me what public service is about. Is that our representatives, our senators, are sent to Washington to do things on behalf of the people they represent, and some go there and they take that responsibility seriously and they focus on those efforts, like Senator Dole. Others do not. Others go for other reasons, either partisan political reasons or personal ambitions. But working for the congressman, he was focused on his district, and I was in a position where I could really have an impact on something that that was important to the place I grew up in. So that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
Dennis?
Yeah, I don't have any specific, I have a bunch of memories that come to mind, but most of them relate to my service, my work with Senator Dole when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was once he got comfortable with you and felt you were competent, he empowered you. He wanted you to come up with ideas for him. He was a competitor, so I like to compete. And so I just have many fond memories of working with him and seeing your ideas come into fruition through Senator Dole, who had the office. But but he was just a tremendous, he is a tremendous guy. And it was just wonderful, working for him at that time.
I loved my time working for Senator Sarbanes or Proxmire or Regal or Dodd, but and I have great memories of all of that. Last night I was thinking of something that happened like 21 years ago. When I was dating my wife, I was always, I remember I loved JFK, so going to a White House dinner, I always thought would be the highest point in life. And I told my wife when I was dating her, I said, if you go with me I said, I'm going to get you to White House dinner sometime. So last night, 21 years ago, I was Assistant Secretary of Commerce named Patrick Mulloy, and the Irish Prime Minister shows up. And the president always meets the prime minister and they exchange some kind of a crystal ball in the afternoon. I was invited over there to be at that ceremony. And then I shook President Clinton's hand. And then I got invited to bring my wife to the dinner that night. It was a buffet dinner, but I was there and I got to shake the president's hand again. And Clinton looks at me and said, twice in one day. Remember? Then after the buffet dinner, we all went to a piano with the Irish Prime Minister and the President playing and singing Irish songs like Danny Boy. My son is named Daniel. So, I mean, that is a memory that's really embedded in my head. It was just a wonderful, I pulled it off in some way. And so my wife stays with me,
Okay, with that, it seems like we're just about out of time. So I want to thank Pat and his team, Dennis, Debbie, and Ed, for the excellent presentation and the information that you provided to the students and the staff and everybody else who's listening. I just want to tell everybody that we still have one more session left. That starts at 7:15 tonight, and that's on management consulting in the Washington, D.C. area and beyond. And the link and stuff has been available through the college. So
John, we're going to stay on this Zoom link because the King's College radio, the fellow that runs that is going to have us. He wants to talk to.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Afterwards.
I just want to make sure that, just to say to the students and stuff, if they want to get off and move on to the other one, that's fine. But again, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Patrick and his group for on behalf of KWAC that the spiritual career day, I think, has worked out very well. And thank you again.
Thanks, John. Thanks for all your help. And if the panelists would stay on, I think the fellow that runs the King's College Radio wants to conduct some chats with us. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
There he
There
is.
he is.
Took me a while to unmute there.
Isa and I had a chance to talk a little earlier today. He's of Syrian background, right, Isa? And he came up and found King's College and loves it there, right?
Yes, sir. First generation in the United States. So as you can see with the background, this is the dream right here.
Yeah,
Well, one step at a time, as they say.
yeah.
But I guess on behalf of the King's Radio and for everyone there, thank you all for joining it. Like, taking your time to, speak with all of us today. From you, Mr. Ambassador, and to you as well, foreign counselor for politics in the U.S. Embassy of Uzbekistan, Mr. Williams. You know what? I never think of joining the radio. I'd be, interviewing, a panel like this. I thought I'd be, with the professors and, students. And well, as the saying goes, expect the unexpected. And that's how it is. But seeing the time is 6:06, and well, granted, all the questions I did have ready, most of you guys answered it. So I guess makes my job a little easier. But there is one question I do want to answer. And it goes for all of you because everyone has different walks of life, different experiences. And during the panel discussion, it was clear all of you guys had, a vision that this is what you wish to attain to be. And there wasn't any deviation from it, as most of you said, there was no opportunities you gave up, but rather you went all in for this one. But my question is, while the ride, to reach where you were at had ups and downs, what would your advice be for those who are currently in the low, where, they see where they want to go, but, it doesn't look like the light at the end of the tunnel is bright, so to speak? How would you be advice for those to get, give them that one last, stand there, like, one last push for them to rise back up?
This time we're going to go from Dennis to Ed to Debbie, and then me.
Well, are you talking about sort of looking for a job, Isa? Or
Yeah. So the way I was thinking about it, Mr. Ambassador, was in a sense, like, let's say, someone has the goal, they want to reach, Capitol Hill, and they get there. But let's say afterwards, things don't work out too well, and, they get into like a little slump, for example.
yeah.
There be any advice for them, like, it's like how to get them back up if you're like, any advice like that, things go wrong, to keep your head up type of thing?
Well, first thing you have to know is that everybody has those moments. Everybody has low points where they're wondering, they're unsure of where they're going. They're unsure of themselves sometimes. So the first thing you have to realize is that your experience is you're not the only one having this experience. A lot of people have that experience. So that's remembered. And the second thing I would just say is read a lot, consume information, because opportunities that you may not be aware of may present themselves, ideas may present themselves. The third thing I'd say is just persevere. Talk to people, talk to everybody you know, because someone talk to 50, 60, 70 people because people want to help you. People will want to help you. So those are the three: talk to people, read, and realize you're not alone. Other people are in that situation. So that's what I would advise.
Very helpful.
No,
Ed?
really well stated. It comes to mind a coach I had way back when would say, things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem, right? So even when you're in that situation where it seems pretty bad, or that the career that you envision having isn't the one that you're having, I think I know the value of my education. I know the value of a King's College education is that you can get thrown off in the deep end of the pool somewhere, and you're going to learn how to swim. You'll persevere, to Dennis's point. You'll find your way. I think what Dennis said about reading and informing yourself about different career paths, if the one that you're on is not working out, is really, really instructive, because I've seen this over time. Sometimes you're on the Hill and you're wondering, heck, are these skills that I'm developing transferable to any other arena? And the answer is yes. When you break it down, part of what our jobs, at least my job, and I'm sure Dennis would echo this, and Pat, your experience on the Hill, you'd say this. I mean, a lot of it was about communicating complex public policy matters in a more accessible way than we sometimes do in Washington. So taking your critical thinking skills and breaking down a complex matter into its component parts and explaining what it means to real people. That's a skill that can be transferred to any other line of work that you might find yourself in. So the perseverance is important, and it's just remembering that this too shall pass.
Debbie?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like going last. I don't have to add very much except say, you know, I agree with Dennis and Ed. But just building on what Dennis said, I would also say that not only talk to people, but surround yourself with positivity. You know, I think it's easy when you're down and when you're not feeling great about the job or where you're at, to find others who think like that, and then you tend to bring it. You know, everyone kind of sinks to that level, and I think instead, find the people who are doing the things that you want to be doing, who are positive, who love their jobs, and surround yourself with that positivity while you're reading, while you're talking to people, while you're going to events, while you're kind of putting yourself out there. And I think that will help you understand that it really is a phase. And you know, if you continue to work and you continue to focus on your goals, you'll be able to come out of that slump and move on to something else.
Yeah, I would just add to the three panelists, and they were all terrific in giving their answers. My wrestling coach in high school used to tell us, you know, a winner never quits and a quitter never wins. So be persistent. The second thing I found very helpful in life, and who knows where about it all, but I found prayer helpful, asking God's help in some things. That doesn't mean you know that there's a God, but I think it does focus your mind and help you get through times, bad times, because, you know, we all have them, and we all find different ways to try and jump out of them and move on. And you got very good advice, but those are the two things I remember. Be persistent, and sometimes you ask God's help along the way as well.
Yeah, all were very good advice. Because I know a couple of my buddies in the political science, you know, we've always had, you know, had that little thing where it's like like some of us, like me, for example, I do plan to become a foreign service officer. So when I heard you know, our foreign service counselor, Miss Debby, was going to be on there, you know, that perked my interest quite a bit, as well as with you, Mr. Ambassador. And but it's like we all thought, you know, like these are such high goals, you know, what are the odds of us attaining it? Because the way we're seeing with the political system as is today, you know, in some cases it's more divided than it was, you know, let's say 30 years ago. We were always trying to figure out, you know, how do we get our way through it? And sometimes we get a little bit into that slump saying, sometimes maybe it's just not possible now, but how do we get there? So it's always good to hear some encouragement, especially when things like this are happening. So I do appreciate that advice. But other than that, I've extinguished all my questions because you've all answered it in your panel discussions. That being said, thank you all. I do appreciate it.
Well, it's a thank you, and I want to thank each of the panelists. You guys did a great job. I think the students and others at King's will be very grateful. And so good luck with all of you, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.